Now, queues at the petrol station may be annoying for drivers, but for governments, they spell big trouble. And if there's also a hint that the turkeys may not be ready for Christmas, the jitters began to turn into panic. The Prime Minister returned from New York, trumpeting the end of a glorious summer, but he and his ministers could now be facing a winter of discontent. I'm joined now by the Transport Secretary, Grant Shapps.
Good morning.
Grant Shapps, is it fair to scold motorists when panic buying when all they're trying to do is to make sure they can get to work tomorrow morning?
Yeah, and I think the important thing to know is within the country, at the 6 refineries and 47 storage facilities, there's plenty of fuel. There's no shortage of the fuel within the country. So the most important thing is actually that if people carry on as they normally would and fill up their cars when they normally would, then you won't have queues and you won't have shortages at the pump either. So it's not like we don't have the fuel in the country. We do need to just ensure that people are filling up when they need to fill up, rather than thinking, I better go and fill up now just in case I need it next week or the week after.
You've been telling people that all week, and it hasn't really made any difference. And actually, people are queuing up. And in fact, what they're now doing is driving past empty stations which do not have petrol. So the reassurances that it's all going to be OK absolutely conflicts with people's actual experience. So let me ask you again, is it enough just to tell people don't panic buy when they know that they cannot get petrol in their cars and get to work tomorrow morning?
No, I think government has to also provide the reassurance as well. Otherwise, as you say, people will say, well, I can see what's happening with my own eyes. And that's why this morning we've done a big package of measures there, short, medium and long term, to help alleviate the issues, which actually fundamentally come down to one thing. Coronavirus has created massive shortages of lorry drivers, tanker drivers throughout the world, and coronavirus stopped us from testing them. So we couldn't bring new drivers into the marketplace during the lockdown. So what we've done is doubled the capacity, brought the army in, which we've announced today, in order to carry out more testing. So those are short-term things. Visas as well, in order to plug the gap between here and Christmas. And then medium-term, boot camps to train more people into what is now a much better paid market, apprenticeships. And I'm appealing today for 1 million drivers who have HGV licenses, some of whom have left the market, to come back in, attracted perhaps by those higher wages. And in the long term, better truck stops, better pay and conditions in an industry which has traditionally been undercut and hasn't been paying the salaries that would attract enough people to the industry. So a big package of measures, which I hope will help to reassure people that actually we've got plenty of fuel. If everyone buys it as they normally would, we won't be getting queues at the petrol stations as well.
Well, look, let's deal with long term in a moment, but let's talk about the short term. You are issuing just 5,500 short-term visas for chicken pluckers and 5,000 for qualified HGV foreign drivers. The head of the European Haulage Association says, you haven't got a chance, mate. They are not going to come for that money. This is really not going to solve the problem, is it? There will not be turkeys for Christmas.
Well, I don't agree. In terms of the scale of the issue, there have been long-term systemic shortages.
The guy who represents all the haulage drivers you want to bring back. He's telling you the money is not enough. And by the way, our domestic haulage boss is saying we need 90,000. 5,000 barely a drop in the ocean.
Yeah, so Logistics UK, who are actually the UK's biggest haulage representative organisation, have very much welcomed the package this morning and do say that it's a significant package. It's not just, of course, those visas, which is very short term. It's also the big bottleneck is there are plenty of people who know how to drive a lorry, but where they need to get tested or retested, DVSA, that's the testing agency, has had this massive restriction. Now, you might say, why haven't you acted on that post-COVID? In fact, we have. We reopened that testing back in April, we've managed to double the capacity, partly by using freedoms that we've got outside of the EU to change the way the driving tests work, to get more capacity, to get more tests through. Bringing in the army will be a very significant assistance there as well, and that way we can get more people tested and onto the roads. So the visas is only one element of it. Testing is very much front and centre, and then of course there's appeal for people who can already drive to sort of to realise actually the salaries now for driving lorries has gone up tremendously. We think that's a good thing. We think there have been too many years of people being undercut to do a decent day's work, and the fact that people will get paid properly in this industry is something which will help it in the long term, and it's actually what's required to have this industry sustainable in the long term without constantly having to import labour, which is what's happened up till now.
Can I put to you why people in the industry are pretty cross about this? They say it's all too little too late. Even in the press release you yourself put out, the boss of the Food and Drink Confederation says this is something UK food and drink manufacturers have asked for over the last few months. What they're basically saying is that they've been telling you for months this is going to happen, and you did nothing.
Not true. We have already doubled the testing.
Well, it's in your press release. I'm not making it up. It's in your press release.
As I say, we've already doubled the capacity, so it's just not true that nothing's been done. And let's not pretend this is sort of, some UK-specific problem. It's not. In Europe, for example, in Poland, the shortage is 123,000 drivers. So there isn't just one simple, and you pointed out yourself, there isn't one simple solution to this. But we have, despite having had shortages, managed to ensure that petrol was still getting to petrol stations, food still getting to the shops. I'm afraid there has been some pretty irresponsible briefing out by one of the road haulage associations, which has helped to spark a crisis. And that's very, very unhelpful. It's counterproductive. And I know that they're desperate to have more European drivers undercutting British salaries, and that's been their ask all along. We actually think that it's important that this country can train people, that people can do a proper day's work, that they're paid properly for that work, and that the long-term solution cannot be undercutting British salaries and having a constant cycle, a vicious cycle, where you never get out of that problem of not being able to train people here and employ them here on decent salaries.
Isn't it, forgive me, Transport Secretary, isn't it a little shabby to be blaming everybody else when actually this arises out of a choice you yourself made? On August the 5th, you wrote to a group of MPs saying, and I'm quoting from your letter, "I do not support using foreign labour to tackle a long-standing issue in the haulage industry." You were very specific that you did not want this to happen. You made a choice. Isn't it a little shabby now to be basically saying, oh, it's everybody else's fault, when you made that choice?
No, just once again, let me say, I do not believe, as I said in that letter, that the long-term solution to Britain's shortages of HGV drivers is to say the only choice we have is to import European drivers, undercut British salaries, and not skill up people to do the job here in the United Kingdom. So that's absolutely right. I also recognise, I'm completely pragmatic about this, that we need to ensure that people are reassured now that this rather sort of manufactured situation has been created, because, as I say, there's enough petrol in the country. It's if everyone goes and buys it on the same day.
Hang on, just for a second. When you say this manufactured situation, manufactured by whom? How?
Well, as I say, there was a meeting that took place about 10 days ago.
It was made up?
A private meeting in which one of the haulage associations decided to leak the details to the media, and that has created, as we have seen, quite a large degree of concern. People naturally react to those things. The good news is, as I say, there is plenty of fuel. The bad news is, if everyone carries on buying it when they don't need it, then you would continue to have queues. sooner or later, everyone's cars will be more or less filled up, and there won't be anywhere else to put fuel. It's not like, say, the toilet roll crisis at the beginning of the pandemic, where people could sort of stockpile it. It's very difficult to do that with fuel, and so it will come to an end. But we just appeal to people to be sensible, fill up when you normally would. We've got this big package in place today in order to help alleviate the pressure, and we ask people to do their part. Now we've got this package in place doing its part.
Some people in your own party are pretty unhappy about this. What they're saying is you've rolled over on driver shortages and relaxed immigration rules. So when you next get an appeal from farmers about fruit rotting in the fields, or hospitality bosses about the fact that they can't hire chefs and waiters, and care homeowners about lack of staff, are you all going to roll over again?
Well, it very much supports the point I'm making, which is we don't want to be in a situation where we are not training people here. And in each of these cases, we need to look to the sectors involved to make sure we are, or they are, training up the next generations. And in haulier drivers, for example, it's 99% male. It's average age 55. There is a systemic problem that the government is very keen to work with the sector on, but the sector will also need to help recruit people in and train people and help improve standards in those sectors, so that it's more pleasant to drive. And then in other sectors, as you say, there are already schemes that enable people to come in to pick fruit. It's a seasonal role. But yes, broadly speaking, as you suggest, we believe that we should be training people in this country, and that people should be able to earn a decent wage in this country. And that is absolutely at the heart of the government's approach, which is why, even with the visa to drive lorries, it's limited until Christmas.
OK, the deputy leader of the Labour Party had a colourful description of Conservatives at a party yesterday evening, and she spoke to me this morning, and she made clear that what she really had in mind was not all Conservative voters, or indeed all Conservatives, just the Cabinet. Are you OK to be described as scum?
I just see it absolutely appalling. There's just no place in public life for that sort of language, that sort of behaviour. I saw that she had described herself as being somebody who wanted to see a kinder kind of politics back in 2019. I'm very sorry that seems to have disappeared. I watched your interview and literally wondered to myself, is she talking about me here? I'm just not clear. And I think it would have been...
I was talking about
really,
you.
I wasn't sure, but I think it'd be befitting if she actually just apologised rather than talked around the subject.
We're coming up to COP26. Just one quick point, because this is really in your bailiwick. If we want to get to net zero, we are going to have to stop people using fossil fuels. Will you be recommending to the Chancellor that in his autumn statement he raises fuel duty?
Well, as you'd expect me to say in his autumn statement, he'll have a lot of decisions to take, and I'm not going to preempt his budget. But
I'm just asking this because this is your job. Would you say to him, "Here's something you could do"? Offer him an option.
As I say, he'll have to come up with decisions about his autumn budget. But what I can tell you is actually a lot of people are already switching to electric. And actually, because of the crisis this weekend, I was just checking the latest numbers. There are 700,000 cars in Britain today with plugs on the end of them, who will not therefore be involved in the petrol shortage. A lot of people are already switching, and in 8 years' time, there's the end of the sale of pure petrol and diesel cars in any case. So that movement across is already taking place. We've got a very big transport decarbonisation plan in place, which actually helps to track us along that path to zero carbon in cars. And then critically, in the much harder to decarbonise parts of transport, which are ships, but planes in particular. And this country is leading the way, for example, with hydrogen aircraft being tested out at the moment.
Okay. Grant Shapps, thank you very much indeed.
You're welcome.